To the Kickstarter segment of Morning at NTV. We are, of course, coming to you live from the Kampala Arena Conference Center, and we are going to be discussing inside Kenya's ban on importation of Uganda's powdered milk. It's, of course, the latest in a series of trade spats between the two countries, one that threatens to derail relations in that particular sector. However, I know that many, including honchos in Uganda, are doing everything it takes to ensure that this is rectified. But before I introduce my panelists who will be helping us understand what exactly is going on, let me just give you a preamble. In anticipation of long range, the government has stopped the importation of milk powders to cushion the industry from surplus production and low prices. That was a statement that was issued by the KDB Managing Director, Margaret Kiboji, and the board will apparently no longer issue new permits until further notice. Through the letter, though I must say the letter appears generalized, some business persons allege it was targeted at imports from Uganda, which until recently were being blocked from the Kenyan market. Uganda's rising trade in milk exports is likely to suffer a new dent following that particular news rollout. Processed milk accounts for more than 35% of Uganda's marketed milk, according to the DDA. It's also not known how much milk powder is exported to Kenya, but we shall be understanding that in this discussion. I'm joined by the Chief Membership Officer at the Private Sector Foundation Uganda, Francis Kisirinya, here in the studio. But we shall also be joined by Justine Wamae, who will be on Zoom from Kenya, Nairobi. A very good morning first and foremost to Justine Wamae, who is joining us, from Kenya. How are you doing this morning, lady?
I am well, and you?
Not bad at all. We are, of course, happy to have you on board. Help us understand what exactly was in the ban letter that appears to put Uganda in a very tight position in regard to the exportation, which, from your point of view, importation of milk powders.
From how I see it, it's internal politics that is spilling over to Uganda. Our former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, is in the milk business, and in a bid for the new government to push him out or to bring competition, the ban on milk, from my take, is internal politics spilling into the Ugandan aspect of importation in Kenya. So it's merely politics, and it's saddening that leaders who have been given positions in this country, especially in Kenya, need to understand that everything they say has an implication. Now, when that was said, trying to control the local market, and then now Uganda is seen like it cannot bring in milk, it leaves us, the consumers, open and bare, because consumers in Kenya purchase that which they can afford. You know, market forces, our market is market-driven, demand and supply comes into play. So how I see it is politics, and in my opinion, I feel it was reckless.
Detail on the politics at play here. You spoke of the fact that President William Ruto appears to be going after the interests of President Uhuru Kenyatta, that is a former. What are these interests? And could you be a little bit more specific on that?
Remember that Uhuru Kenyatta has been seen to be dominating the milk industry in Kenya with his Brookside company. So his deputy actually is the one who said, Rigathi Gachagua, that his role is to fight cartels in the milk industry. So when he said he's going to deal na mtu wa maziwa, which was to imply Uhuru Kenyatta, then I think even the Ugandan importers fell into that net, fell into that issue of watu wa maziwa or cartels. So the interest maybe is, which is saddening, a characteristic of African politics. When one is out of power and you do not agree with them, you end up following him or trying to, revenge at him. And I believe it is the reason most African leaders do not want to leave power, because they do not know what the other person will do to them when they get into power. So in all this interest of trying to fight Uhuru Kenyatta, who owns Brookside, And it is interesting to note that the farmers say that they sell their milk according to who is buying the best price. Of course, there is now the finished product that is milk from Uganda, but also local farmers are spoiled for choice. There are so many companies that buy milk from them. But at the end of it all, Brookside or Uhuru Kenyatta's company purchases better in price for the farmers. So the important thing is not fighting cartels, because farmers are happy with their produce, and then consumers, the Kenyans, are happy with the variety, including that from Uganda. And in the spirit of the EAC, the East Africa community, I believe that our deputy president, who is now at the forefront of this, needs to be educated into the aspects of East Africa community. Of course, there's the customs union, where you can free goods, goods can move freely in the East Africa community. That is something that is at risk now from what he's saying. As he fights Uhuru Kenyatta internally, he's also affecting the East Africa community unity.
We return to the studio very shortly for perspective from a local business executive. What do you speak about the earlier spats, those are trade spats, over maize and eggs? And this were, or rather happened, during Uhuru Kenyatta's regime, or when he was still president. When you say it is politics at play, how do you explain the trend of business spats between Kenya and Uganda, even when President Uhuru was still in power?
During that time of Uhuru Kenyatta, it is the Kenyan farmers who had complained that the influx of Ugandan maize and eggs is putting them out of business. But what government would have done was to provide a conducive environment for farmers, if it's animal feed, if it's maize and fertilizer, to provide subsidies or to empower the farmers to produce at a lower cost of production. But this issue of looking at trying to control the market actually goes against the EACC, the Customs Union Act, because when you're being protective of your industry, yet it is the cost of input that is discouraging farmers. How I wish the government of Kenya would empower their farmers, would look for solutions if it's GMO, and that is something that even Kenyans should agree that Uganda is very fertile, it is arable land, but we cannot compare with Kenya. So Kenya needs a different crop resilient, plants, crop resilient, animal feed, not climate resilient, so that our plants, rather what we grow in Kenya, is not at a higher cost compared to Uganda. So in my thinking, Uganda is taking advantage of its competitiveness, and that is why they're able to export. And they're not doing it out of malice. It is part of the EAC, East Africa community. So the government of Kenya, going forward, should avoid this protectionist view and try to empower their farmers by lowering cost of production. So that if an egg from Uganda comes to Kenya and the other egg from Kenya, they can compete on, in terms of price availability. Because this is market driven. We cannot continue protecting farmers who are not producing at a cheaper cost.
Justine Wamae, for that very elaborate preamble, and it should, of course, embolden our own understanding of what is the foundational issues behind this latest development. Let's now come to the studio and speak to Francis Kisirinya, the Chief Membership Officer at the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda, to first bring us up to speed with your reaction as PSFU on the ban on the exportation of Uganda's powdered milk.
Thank you very much, and good morning, all our viewers. And Justin, thank you very much for that perspective, which you've really put on the table.
Very interesting.
Yeah, quite interesting. And we should say that for us as Uganda, and the Uganda business people and farmers, we're a little bit worried about the unending unilateral bans of our products. Just for perspective, Uganda's manufacturing sector, about 70% of it is actually supported by is agricultural led, their agricultural value addition, milk, maize products, sugar, and so on and so forth. Now, we've seen over the last few years Kenya unilaterally banning milk, sugar, maize sometimes, and all these things. And this causes a bit of challenges to us, and really does not augur very well for what we call the East African Community, for which all of us are actually signatories on. Now, we are worried this time because you have told us that you are going to have good rains, and therefore you should stop bringing milk here, you know. Now, what becomes of the sugar? Maybe it will be the same thing. What becomes of the maize? What becomes of the... So where does this leave the protocol, the East African Community Protocol, which we actually signed on as two countries? And what happens to the COMESA? What happens to African Free Continental Free Trade Area, which we are also signatories on? We believe, as Uganda, that the actions of Kenya actually, they undermine the spirit of cooperation. Two, they are not helpful to the consumers in Kenya, because the spirit of the open markets was to make sure that consumers can get products at the lowest price they can have. And that drives investment, and that allocates resources better and develops our economies. But if we continue bringing in these sorts of bans, then that denies even the Kenyans the low cost that they could actually access milk and other products on. I think that is very important, and I would like, Justine, I think I'll add my voice to what you have said. And Uganda has gone through this, that every time you are uncompetitive in a product, the best thing is for you to look at your production systems. Ask yourself, where are those areas you could actually create efficiencies in so that prices can come down? Yeah. This is what happened in Uganda. The story of milk, sugar, and whatever you did not come by surprise, or just dropped overnight. No. We invested as a country in the production systems, in the value chains, so that we have these products now at the cost that we are able to provide in Kenya.
Okay, very quickly, before you continue, Mr. Francis Kisirinya, Justine alluded to the fact that the politics at play could be very well defining much of what trade policy will roll out in as far as President William Ruto's regime is concerned. I don't want to go into the politics, because at the end of the day, it's not the crust of the discussion. But has there been engagement at political level with either the Ministry of Trade to ensure that this is quickly dealt with as it ought to be dealt with?
So right now, with the current ban, the engagements have not yet started. But I can tell you that previously, we've really engaged extensively at the technical level, at the political level, and also at the ESC level. At one stage, we were told that, no, we need to verify. The Kenyan needed to verify that really this milk comes from our farms. Okay. And it took so long before these teams could be established. And when they came to verify, it took so long for reports to come. Okay. But even when they came, they still required that we'll have to get export permits, you can imagine. That's you know? So now, and these permits were not, the way they were being issued was not based on some criteria that somebody can say that, okay, if I'm a company A in Uganda, I can export perhaps 10,000 tons. I'm given permits for 10,000 tons. So once in a blue moon, you could be given a permit for 2,000 tons and things like that. So the whole thing, in effect, has really been, there are certain things that are not right within the system.
All right, let's throw back the question of verification of milk products and any other products, for example, that Kenya imports from Uganda. Justine, Mr. Kisirinya has just alluded to the fact that attempts at verification previous attempts, that is, were well ambiguous to the extent that reports took time to come through. What exactly are the issues of contention within the Kenyan business community when it comes to quality of Ugandan products, away from the politics that you say could be responsible for some of these developments?
I think the verification process, probably it is straightforward, but they bring in aspects of making it ambiguous to try and protect the local market. But when I look at the Kenyan consumer, for them, that which is quality and affordable, that is part of demand and supply forces. The Kenyan does not want to know whether it is from Uganda, as long as the Ugandan milk powder is of quality and it is affordable. Remember, the high cost of living is really driving consumers towards the end of, even if you're loyal to your products, but you cannot afford, then you substitute for what is affordable. So I think the verification process brought in issues of interest. There are those who want to be part of, they just want to protect the market from other commodities from other countries, but it is not in the spirit of the East Africa community. Remember now we are in 2023, we're supposed to have a monetary union, but we are still failing on Pillar 1, customs union. Are the goods moving in the block? Are they moving freely? And then labor, services, capital, is it moving freely? So now even as we come up with a common, monetary union, and we have not dealt with the issues, the hard issues of even goods are not moving in freely, I think all this has to go back to the East Africa community and the head of state summit. If they had the policies and the treaties and they know what they had agreed, they need to understand that they are the ones, or rather, whoever who signed into the East Africa community representing the countries, did it, giving it they had the interest at heart. They were doing it for Kenyans, for example. So if it's the Kenyan government, can they remember that I don't think they were forced into the EAC? No, they went there willingly. It is about them to raise the voice and say, okay, maybe this is not doing well for us. But as from where I sit, they knew what they got themselves into, even if it's not this particular administration. And the East Africa community is not a bad thing. If we think big, we think about the large mass of land we have in East Africa, then we think about the 300 million plus population. Somebody who is thinking into the future will see that, you know what, it's not about the small market I have in Kenya, it's about the larger market in East Africa, the 300 million population. So this one will lead competitiveness, quality goods, because people will start saying this is better quality and affordable. So if we want to really integrate as the East African community, I believe even these red tapes and bureaucracies are things that should be done away with. I mean, if Kenya brings something, if Kenya wants to export something to Uganda, I highly doubt that the red tapes and the bureaucracies will be tedious because of the spirit of East Africa community. So mine is just to encourage the leaders in Kenya to stop seeing it as a threat. They signed into the Customs Union Act. They knew, so it is for them to really empower, look at their value chain, look at the loopholes, look at how they're going to improve the processes and how the farmers' agriculture comes into play.
Very much. Let me return to Mr. Kisirinya. We continue to get revelation that perhaps this is far more than what meets the eye. But of course, for now, we have to take what we see. When Justine speaks about the fact that this is not in the good spirit of the East African Economic Community dispensation, well, you can understand, yes, it does bring to halt any effort that ensures that the region comes together pretty quickly, or that process is fast-tracked. Before you bring us up to speed with the magnitude of this particular decision in terms of revenues and for Ugandan farmers, how this pinch will be felt, when you look at the East African dispensation progress, such developments completely derailed the process. The politics could play another day, but the significant way it plays into how economies are realigned. You want Ugandans rather, to be able to export labor efficiently and promptly, and then including goods, and then this comes on board. Do you see that we could be taking ourselves into retaliatory tendencies whereby one country says, okay, if this is what you wish for us, then we are also going to be slow but on some aspects. Do you see the East African protocol being affected gravely?
Yes, very much, and we are very disappointed as the private sector, because definitely we know very well that when we are agreeing to again cooperate,
that's right.
We said this is going to be people-centered.
People-centered.
It is going to be driven by the views of the people, by the benefits to the people. But somehow, what is happening along the way is not the thing that we see. But let me tell you one important thing out of the East African cooperation.
Yeah.
You know, trade has grown so much. Intra-Africa trade, intra-East Africa trade has grown so much that somehow you believe that this was the right thing to do. And I wouldn't know exactly why any country would like to backstep, would like to bring in protectionism again.
Yeah.
Look at the Uganda-Kenya relations, even if we don't look at the East African relations. Today, Kenya enjoys a trade surplus over Uganda. It means they sell more than they import from Uganda. What does that mean? It means jobs, it means government revenue, it means all these sorts of development. Now, if the trade surplus between Kenya and Uganda is about $200 million, I wouldn't even see why we would be fighting over a trade market, a market of about, for Uganda's trade in milk with Kenya is about 96 million. But that is all the milk, fresh milk and stuff like that. But the powdered milk could be a small portion. Why do we get into this sort of disagreement on this sort of thing? It doesn't help at all.
It doesn't, yeah.
So, which means, in the end, you might be attracting some sort of similar behaviors from other countries. The good thing with Uganda is that we are so committed to the East African community that we may not at any one time, or we might not consider retaliation. But I'm telling you, when with losses mount, really.
And could that be the problem, that because other countries are convinced Uganda is more invested in this particular project, then they are taking Uganda for granted?
It could be. It could be, because really, in the past, we thought and we were buying this argument of you affecting our farmers and stuff like that and things like that. But you can see now what Justine has just revealed. There is another angle to it.
There's another
Maybe
angle.
It will never
And
end.
I must agree,
Yes.
Justine's angle has completely flipped my tilt on this, and I would love again to dig a little bit deeper. Justine, let me return to you and ask about what President William Ruto's economic policy seems to look like right now. From the outside, just recently we saw developments including the resignation of the managing director at Kenya Revenue Authority, Mr. Gifi. Of course, it was after he had spoken very elaborately about the need to clean the mess at the taxman in Kenya. And then we see the Kenya Post Authority also having a new top honcho in another William Ruto, this one being Kip Kemboi, who is a mariner. Are we seeing a deliberate effort? Because not a deliberate effort as such. I'm trying to make my way around it. President Ruto is settling scores. That's what you seem to suggest. President Ruto is also rolling out an economic policy that fits for the region. And these two seem to be at loggerheads. What's the way forward? What are the Kenyans saying about this?
You've rightly put it that there's a new way of doing things, and there are new people in the picture. So the Kenyans on the ground are seeing it as a deliberate way of rewarding political loyalists. Though they're cautioning government, and they're telling government that state corporations are not an extension of the ruling party. So competency should be above everything else. Not just because someone was working under Uhuru Kenyatta and they enjoy security of tenure, that has to be respected in our constitution. But looking at the economic model of Kenya Kwanza, which is the captain is William Samoei Ruto, they had promised a bottom-up approach. That one, in our minds, Kenyans thought that the list of the list would come up. That was the expectation. That goes to include when he would say that the mama mbogas and watu wa boda boda, you know, the motorcycle riders, watakuwa na serikali yao, they'll be in government. Kenyans took it literally. And then now he's rewarding people who are not mama mbogas or who are not watu wa boda bodas. So Kenyans feel like there's a disconnect in what was promised and what is being delivered. But suffice to say that bottom-up is not a bad idea. But the implementation of it all looks like it is at loggerheads, even including the East Africa community. I think they should sit down with their advisors and tell them that even bottom-up can be successful when we even include the East African community. I dare say that consumers are key if you're looking at the market. And also the citizens have their own take, but these citizens are also consumers of products. So it's for the government of William Samoei Ruto to empower the consumers and the citizens through the bottom up. Is it lowering cost of production? Is it providing fertilizers? Is it ensuring that Kenya is not a rain-fed, agriculture country? Right now in Uganda, I'm seeing you have so much rain, yet in Kenya, we are still anticipating rain. So it goes beyond protecting our market, protecting that whose tribe is in power. It goes beyond service delivery and ensuring that your people, the citizens, are well fed. So maybe Kenyans will overlook and say, fine, you need to work with people who are loyal to you, but are these people who are loyal to you competent? Can they deliver on the vision of ensuring that one, Kenya is a stable country in terms of food security, and also Kenya enjoys the benefits of being in the East Africa community?
Very much. Shall be returning to you a little bit later, but in studio, of course, for those that could be just joining us, we have Mr. Francis Kisirinya, the Chief Membership Officer at the Private Sector Foundation Uganda. Let's return home and look at the impact of this particular decision on our own farmers. The amount of milk produced in the country is to the tune of 2.8 billion liters, that is by 2020. Now, by any standards, that is a whole lot of milk. And if we are unable to dispose it off, we don't even have the mechanisms to give it out freely to Ugandans here. That means the wastage is going to be of untold proportions. What are the mitigation measures that you are undertaking right now as the private sector?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think for us, what we see is that the market probably on the eastern side will always be unstable, and the losses are quite incredible. As I said, $96 million lost. A whole lot of money. Yes, 30,000 jobs at risk. But also on the Kenyan side, you are going to lose about 1,000 jobs because of this ban, because people were transporting, distributing, and stuff like that. You are going to lose about 80 million in VAT, in taxes. They are going to lose about another $80 million in printing materials. Because remember, we've been buying printing materials from Kenya, packaging materials from Kenya, to pack in these products and send it
to products to take back to Kenya. So it's interesting how trade plays out.
They're going to lose that. Then the transporters are going to lose another $4 million. So Uganda is going to lose, so are Kenyan business people and consumers going to lose. So for us, what we think as private sector is, this is what we are actually proposing, that perhaps it is time now we concentrated on developing other markets, developing our local internal market, so that we can consume a significant part of the surplus production that we have. We develop other markets in the region and outside the region to accommodate our milk. Of course, very clearly, 70% of the export of milk has been going to Kenya. So we must find somewhere else where we can actually sell this particular milk. But we're also encouraging the government of Kenya that should they feel at any one time that they need to stop some of our products going to their country, it is important for us to tell us in advance, say, in a month, we will not expect, so that we prepare. But this thing of trucks are in the middle as the truck passes Jinja or is around Busia, and then we say, don't come. Companies are losing a substantial amount of money. And this is something that we think should not actually happen within the spirit of the East African community. And for the Kenyan and our rest of our brothers within the East African, the benefits are so much within the community. Let us stay the course. Let us have the trust in the markets, in the East African community markets. They are going to distribute and give us benefits, all of us that will benefit from. I've already told you that the intra-East Africa trade has grown so much. Let me tell you that, like for instance, in Uganda's case, Uganda never used to export anything that is not value added. We used to export primary products. But now we can export value added products, which means the benefits are here. You know, the Kenyans too will benefit. The Tanzanians too will benefit. I like our president. You know, we had challenges with the rice here, and said, okay, this is the spirit that we undertook as ESC. If Tanzanians are producing rice cheaper than ourselves, let them bring it. Let us do something else ourselves, or let's try to improve our own production systems, and then we will be able to compete. I think that is the spirit that we should be looking out for. All
right, talking about the spirit of East Africa and the need to ensure that trade is smooth, allow me just bring the issue of sugar into this mix, because it's always an opportunity to look at how the general trade picture is across the region. There was a time, should be 2 months ago, Justine, when President William Ruto was concerned, reportedly, genuinely, about the fact that Ugandans were taking up jobs at Mumia's sugar factory after the, was it receivership or takeover by the Sarai Group. And he was very emphatic, saying that he needs a new investor in place, one who is not Sarai Group from Uganda. Bring us up to speed with the latest developments with regard to Mumia's sugar and the fate of Sarai Group and Ugandans there.
There is nothing much that has been said that is different. That's still the conversation. So I can't really speak for government, but the information in the public is that they're still looking for an investor. But let me add that even if the Ugandans are coming to work in Kenya, it's the Kenyan government to understand why. Probably the labor market is cheaper, you know? And when we say that common market, what does that include? Labor, services, capital. So probably it's for the cost of labor from Uganda might be cheaper than compared to Kenya. And I don't know why Kenya is always fighting this. Remember, I think in Uganda you have 17 sugar companies, and in Kenya we only have 5 that are failing. So it goes back to, in as much as you want to protect the Kenyan market, then there's need for even the Kenyan government to look at the core competency. What is Kenya producing cheaply? How can they lower cost of production? How can they empower the manufacturers? Interesting to note that the manufacturers in cooking oil, they were saying that they have come to Uganda and they have leased land where they are growing their crude palm oil. Given the new information from Indonesia and Malaysia, that they will not be selling crude palm oil, but they will be selling value-added oil, meaning something that is already a finished product. So if even the manufacturers in Kenya are going to lease land in Uganda, that is in the spirit of East Africa community. So this small, in my opinion, I think the generation I come from and the generation that the leaders of this country are, they are not really receptive to change. And they want to show Kenyans in terms of political visibility that we are protecting you. So it is not helping at all. In fact, protectionism is not helping. So I think that they should ask themselves why Uganda has 17 sugar companies. They all produce, they all sell, but Kenya has 5 and they're failing. So it is, the challenge is internal, looking at internally at our inefficiencies and trying to improve instead of barring other countries or other players who want to come and invest in Kenya.
allow me ask Mr. Francis Kisirinya on what next for Uganda. We have the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have South Sudan, we have Burundi, we have Rwanda, we have Tanzania to export to. Why shouldn't we be focusing on making sure that inroads into these vast markets are taken advantage of?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think as Uganda, and as the business community in Uganda, what we are doing is to try to open up these markets for our business people.
That's right.
As private sector foundation alone, we've really had a lot of work. We've gone to Congo, Kinshasa and Goma looking for businesses.
That's right.
We've been to Southern Sudan. We've just been to South Africa. Unfortunately,
under what ages have you been there? There is going as a private sector foundation Uganda, working outside of government strategy. Is there an alignment between the two? Yes, there is an alignment between the two, because actually what has happened in some of these business forums, we've moved as part of what they call the joint permanent commissions, that the two governments usually are working on and agreeing on trade, on engaging in trade, on diplomacy and investment and a lot of those things. So for Congo, for Rwanda, which we are going to be going to soon. For Sudan, the president has just been in Algeria, South Africa. All this has been within the framework of the JPC. Unfortunately, we are trying to expand those markets there. That's right. Now, we had done the same before in Kenya. We were in Mombasa, we were in Nairobi, trying to open up markets. I think it is so unfortunate that our Kenyan colleagues are actually not playing ball. They are not playing back. But we are very hopeful. They're actually playing hard ball. Hard ball, actually. I said, don't come. We are hopeful that when the other markets open up, we as a country, we will be able to absorb the 3 billion liters of milk which we're actually producing, will become even more and more efficient. And we'll go back to Kenya, by the way, because in any case, if they don't work on their production systems, it is not only going to be milk. There is the sugar issue. Sugar, maize. There is maize, And as we move to invest, I think they will find themselves disadvantaged, just like it were in the 90s and late 2000s. The issues that Kenya is looking at, is suffering from today. Uganda went through this, Justin, if you remember, and yourself. You remember here in the 90s, in 2000s, all jobs, significant jobs, CEOs, chief accountants, were by Kenyans. But what happened is investment in education, and now the clock has actually... We are not there. We are not there. But we actually believe in free markets, and it is important for us as a country to make sure that we make those investments and open up and compete. That is the best way we can All right, Justine Wamae, there you are. You've heard Francis Kisirinya sounding very optimistic that things will return to normal in Kenya, so that we can continue to trade as comfortably and as smoothly as we ought to. What's your last word on this?
It's good Francis is encouraging Kenyans. But it's interesting to note that in 6 days' time, Kenyans have been told to resist eggs, because the opposition leader is saying that the president has interest in eggs business, so Kenyans should resist. So I believe that the times are they're going to be very difficult for Kenya. And I'm happy sometimes General Muhoozi gives us a sense of humor, because in Kenya, we are really challenged. So, but one thing I'd remind Kenyans is that the chicks that are sold in Uganda, Uganda purchases 1 million chicks, I think, daily from Kenya, and then we are refusing their eggs. So why are we refusing eggs from our own chicks? So I want the leadership of Kenya to look at the aspect of economic East Africa integration with an eye, a bigger third eye, a bigger lens, to see that Kenya benefits more from this, and should not go into protecting all this, the integration and the trade. But Francis is rightfully is very positive, and I'm happy that the Ugandans are not angry. Mine is to assure them it's just internal politics that are spilling over. But when they come back to their right senses, they realize that the bigger picture is East Africa integration.
Wamae, founder at the Inatutusha movement, for those perspectives and insight into what could actually be the reasons behind the developments in Kenya. I do hope that house gets in order as soon as it ought to. Many thanks to you too, Francis Kisirinya, Chief Membership Officer at the Private Sector Foundation Uganda, for those